Good evening. Welcome to the November 6th, 2024 meeting of the Sunbury Services Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
Clerk Apple.
Here.
Mayor St. John.
Here.
Chair. Here. Mr. Grumney.
Here.
For present, we have quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes from our October 16th meeting. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. Grumney. Roll call.
Apple.
Yes.
Mr. Grumney.
Yes.
Mr. Ayer. Yes. Mayor St. John.
Yes.
4 yeas, minutes passed.
It's very empty out there, so we'll skip through the visitor section and go right on to new and unfinished business. Mr. Hennessy.
Yeah, so just to get this started a little bit, Carla's going to do the presentation. You may recall earlier this summer, we talked about the stormwater legislation that we've been working on. Since that time, we've done some outreach to the developers directly. So I'll let Carla talk to you a little bit about that. But the goal here is to ultimately begin to get this in front of council for readings, hopefully here later this month. So as the schedule suggests. So with that, Carla, you want to help walk them through the main points?
Yes, absolutely. And if it's okay with you, I will stay seated during this informal presentation unless you'd like me to stand in front of you.
It's totally fine.
Okay. So for the stormwater legislation, since we've already had a presentation on this earlier this year, and you're lucky Daryl told me since I wasn't here, otherwise this presentation would have been very long. I've got a few slides for you to highlight in the legislation, you know, what we're doing and what our process is going to be moving forward. You know, how is this going to make the city better? So why is this legislation needed? The legislation itself is something that is already a requirement in the state of Ohio and locally. So in many ways, many aspects of this legislation are already being met. So I don't want anybody here to think that this new legislation is being brought because we are out of compliance with something. So what are we doing now? Right now, when it comes to this document in front of you, and we'll get into the details, we are going through and making sure we're meeting all the requirements for stormwater management as far as detention, retention, so quantity and quality. For this document, because it's something that we haven't formally had in our code, we did a little bit of outreach too. You know, just to make sure that the developers and builders in the area that have been working in the city were familiar with what we're doing and could take a look at it and let us know if they had any questions. So 3 weeks ago, we sent out this document, the 16-page document for the legislation, and asked for feedback. I did receive a couple emails stating that they received the document, but no comments. That's not surprising because what we're doing is very typical in other communities. So we weren't asking for anything outrageous. So the stormwater legislation in front of you, erosion and sediment control will be the focus of this document. And within that document, we're going to be looking at the application, procedures, fees, inspection. So we're looking for some accountability here, and enforcement. The picture and graphic I have on here, it's just showing a few different reasons why we have to follow stormwater management. But I didn't want you to focus necessarily on that since we're going to hone in on our process. So the depiction you have on the right is the table of contents, and I've kind of pointed to 4 different locations for the topics that I want to focus on in the subsequent slides. But one key concept I want to make sure everybody understands is the difference between major construction versus more of an individual lot or small scale construction. So I didn't define it on this slide with a measurement, but in general, the EPA states that major construction is considered over 1 acre. So we have a lot of developments that are over this benchmark, and then it triggers certain requirements, which I can get into if you'd like. Let me know. But there is also a requirement for smaller developments that are part of these larger developments. So think residential neighborhoods, such as building a house. If you're part of a large major construction project, but doing individual construction, so building a house, you still have to fall under these components. That's what we're trying to capture with this document. How are we handling sediment erosion control for major construction sites and specifically for individual lots? As you know, we have a lot of development here in Sunbury.
Okay, so this is, just so I'm not confused, this is for new and existing. Is that correct? Or is it only for new?
It can be for existing in that if for some reason you have a house and it gets torn down,
Okay,
it would still apply for that individual lot anytime you disturb the area, even if it is under an acre. But a lot of what we're seeing right now is the development of these neighborhoods, these large developments, and then we have these smaller houses that are being built out in many different phases. So it can be for new development, but it also applies if, you know, a house across the street from here gets torn down. It still needs to meet erosion and sediment control.
okay, so existing developments would not apply unless you are doing, again, a rebuild or something that happened. And then, of course, going forward, any new developments coming into Sunbury.
Yes,
Okay,
and just to be clear, any development that occurred before this legislation came before you was still being held to the requirements that they still had to manage the dirt. This is now just defining it and also explaining our procedures and how we will be collecting information, providing forms, collecting fees, and then enforcement.
and fees, I'm sorry to keep harping on this. So
No, you're
fees
fine.
apply to existing developments or only to the new construction, whether on a existing site or new builds on a?
So we will be talking about the fee structure, but it's my understanding that this existing fee structure is a new proposal. If there was an existing fee for this portion of it, I'll ask Daryl to speak to that when we get to that slide.
It would be, this is, to answer John's question, it would be on anything that's new.
Okay.
Like we aren't talking about applying like a fee to all single family
Like
residential
mills, like
units
Sunbury
right now.
mills, right?
And we're not like a retro payment,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yep, so this legislation will need to go to council and get approved, and our goal is to have that approval by the end of the year. With this, starting out in 2025.
Thank you.
Sure. And then this SWP 3, you'll see it written out all throughout this document and in different forums, SWPPP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. This is going to be a common term in this document when you're looking at it, lovingly called SWIP. So just put an S in front of WIP. So that's the lingo for the stormwater community. So if you hear me say SWIP, I'm talking about the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And that is a specific document. And we're going to go through and show you some of the papers that will be given out to applicants related to this plan. So for the application procedure, in your packet, at the end of the legislation, which ends on page 22 of your packet, you're going to come across 4 different forms. And here are 2 of them. So for this first slide, I wanted to explain where we will be giving these documents and at what time in our process. So the one on the right, the review cover sheet, this is something that can be given out for that major or individual lot. So if it's over an acre or under, and then I pointed an arrow there. I know it's difficult to read, but essentially it's calling out in there. is your project over an acre? And is it part of a larger project that required a stormwater pollution prevention plan? So this will be a sheet that is given out to developers when they start to work on their stormwater plans that they'll be submitting to engineering for approval. For an individual lot, if it comes in just for a building permit, they will also get this form, but at that time it would go to them as part of the zoning certificate. So there are two different times that you could receive this form. Hopefully on the front end, you receive it during the larger development. So they may be seeing this more than once, but it is a checkbox that our staff internally will be looking for as we do our approvals. Now, the other document, the bottom left side, that is a stormwater pollution prevention plan checklist. I only took a snapshot of the very top of the document. It is 6 pages long. This checklist does not need to be filled out for individual lots that are less than an acre. It is included in the legislation document, so you'll see it referenced. So I included it in here, but really only those larger developments are going to need to go through 6 pages of a checklist to this degree. There is another form that they'll need to fill out in order to provide more information for those smaller lots, which we will get to. So here are the other 2 forms. The one on the left is a contractor registration form. Essentially, it states that anybody that is doing land disturbance as part of a project, so this would be given to the major developer, anybody that has to do any land disturbance, no matter what the trade is, needs to sign off that they understand that there is a stormwater pollution prevention plan. They've looked at it and they will follow it. This is just a checkbox to make sure that people realize that they need to follow our requirements. For the other document, it's actually like a front and back. This is the individual lot agreement. And this document, again, we're going to be giving all of them out for any of those larger over 1 acre projects. But this project will also be given to anybody who has a builder that comes in that might not be associated with a developer if they purchased a lot. So this document is going to go through and request that an engineer signs off on the means and methods and making sure that it is meeting all of the erosion and sediment control. On the flip side, because these smaller lots are often part of that larger development, there is another sign off for an engineer stating that it is compliant with the overall master plan. So if you think about it, when a subdivision is being built, someone might live in a house and then a lot gets built later on in the development. So that neighbor, or as we have our inspector out there to look, they might notice maybe the house is being built a lot higher, or maybe the yard is graded differently. So essentially, this document is a sign off for an engineer stating that it fits with the overall master stormwater plan for that development. And if it deviates at all, they have to sign off and state that it would not impact any of the major components of that plan, such as flood routing. And then also I wanted to point out this form at the very bottom has a sign off for Delaware Soil, Water and Conservation District. It is the city's intent to eventually add this component to a contract with the Conservation District for inspections. The inspection cycle for these lots, while it's under construction, is every 7 days during active construction. If for some reason the site lays dormant through the winter, there are some exemptions. They don't have to go out monthly if they're not doing work over the winter. But that would be part of the agreement we have with Delaware Soil Water Conservation District. Sorry about this slide. I know it has a ton of writing on it, But I wanted to make sure you could see all of the language. It is in your packet as well, but I wanted to highlight the main points. And this goes into some of the fee questioning that we discussed briefly earlier. So for the review fees, there are a few different ways that they break down the cost. And they talk about a cost for up to 2 acres for the stormwater pollution prevention plan plus $250 per acre or the fraction thereof. So a little bit of math involved there. And then there's also going to be a deposit for the planning and zoning review as well. So it's going to be 2 different fees that we will be collecting for this. Up in the upper right corner, I have a separate note that is not in the text that we plan on adding before it goes to council. And that is for an individual lot. We were discussing with Delaware County Soil, Water and Conservation District, how much is it going to cost to have them come out and make these weekly inspections? And they stated that around $300 would be in line with what they anticipate for that type of service. So we'll be adding that to the deposit requirement for those individual lots, because a lot of this is for over that 1 acre requirement. And then last but not least, enforcement. I would say this is probably one of the key and most important points to having this legislation active. When you get to the point where something is wrong on a construction site and you know that it's not compliant with the plans, you know, that's great. You can send out warnings, but at what point can you hold them accountable and start that enforcement policy? So this legislation goes into detail on what our enforcement can be, what our authority is to go in and inspect ourselves as a city, or to have you know, someone at our authority go out and do an inspection or a site complaint. Although rare, the EPA could be contacted by someone and they'll come out and do an inspection as well. And then we could have somebody go out and take a look at it. I also wanted to point out that for the enforcement portion of it, there's also a penalty. And we had that language looked at by David Brame, just to make sure that it was in order. And I believe we're good.
Yeah, Dave has asked us to look at what the state enforcement or the state penalty is. I think we were trying to match it with our existing zoning code penalties. So we think we've got a little bit more research to do on the state penalty portion, and then we'll be back to, I think, clean that up just a little bit too.
So if that changes 2 weeks from now, I'll let you guys know at the council meeting. And then I just had discussion and questions.
I have a few questions, but I do really good with examples. So I'm going to run through an example in my head and then you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Sure.
So the first one, I'm a developer coming into Sunbury and I want to develop 30 acres, 0.25 acre a lot. So I just doing some rough math. I would pay the $1,000 for the first 2 acres and then $250 for the other. So I think that's like $28,000. So I'd pay $29,000 to the city of Sunbury based on these fees.
Mhm.
And then I think the $300. Yeah. Okay. And then an example 2, if I am building a single home on 5 acres, I would pay the $1,000 and then another $1,000 for the $250 for the remaining 4 acres. So that's a total of $2,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I understand. That's awesome. And then this might be a question for Daryl. I don't know, but would we allow, think about zoning, planning and zoning, allow variances for this type of thing? Or would it just be it's flat out, you have to meet this? And because I just don't want developers going to say, well, you know, I know we have to meet this, but it'd be great if we didn't. So we're asking for a variance about, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't waive fees. I mean,
Okay.
the fees are in the ordinance and defined by that, so we apply the fee.
Well, what about not just the fee, but the requirement behind the fee, which is you must abide by the fee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no wiggle.
Yeah,
room
this
there.
is
Okay.
not staff.
Like 25
Discretion.
miles per hour, you know, I'll go 42. No, like this.
Okay, very good.
Right.
And this is my last question. What bucket do these funds go into? Is it to maintain the, I don't know if it's to wastewater, if it goes into stormwater, yeah.
So we
Right.
came up with the funds in a way that we feel will cover all of our administration and our review internally, with the idea that if there is anything left over, and there might be some that we spend a little bit more time on, it would go into, I'm assuming it's called the stormwater.
Yeah,
fund.
stormwater use of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't created, and Damon, you and I were talking a little bit about this. We've talked about a stormwater utility. I mean, that might be the source at which you would go to, but we don't have that utility set up. So, you know, it would be, again, it would be a source available for if the city needed to, I don't know, perform some sort of a stormwater activity.
Some type of remedy or
Yeah.
something.
I mean, I don't think we're going to be rich necessarily
No,
here,
but yeah,
but we might have some resources.
Yeah, and certainly we can evaluate it. If for some reason it isn't enough, we adjust our legislation and
Right.
justify it accordingly.
and I'm assuming this isn't something that Cutting Edge Sunbury is doing. This is something other cities are doing, have been doing, and okay.
I think that's why the developers and builders didn't bat an eye when
Mhm.
we sent it out. It was developed based on some other legislation, from my understanding,
Mhm.
by CT consultants. So it is very common, has a feel that I think everybody's familiar with.
EPA standards and law, and this is specific to Sunbury, but also, I mean, generally accepted the format. I mean, in terms of, here's the expectation, here's how you apply for, here's the different toll gates in terms of like putting a cash reserve on deposit so we can then pay inspectors.
Yeah.
If you're in violation, you know, we can not only come on your property, but if you're blocking us, we can issue a warrant to come on your property. I mean, this is all what I would consider like new development, Price Pond, Rolling Hills. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. It could be Ohashi's expansion or something.
Mhm.
Right? It's
Yes.
Something like where you are about to impact the earth
Right.
and potentially impact the grade or
Yeah.
impact the way that water flows, and which can cause pollution and all those other things that you mentioned or had on the first slide. And how do we hold them accountable? What we found is that, you know, the EPA may have legislation, but then they point back to us and say, okay, but what does your ordinance say? How are you going to hold them accountable? Which leads me to my next question around like violations and penalty. Maybe we'll start with penalty because I think this one's pretty clear cut. So for each violation, I'm going to call them the developer, but it's really the applicant. I think the applicant who holds the stormwater permit, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. If they're in violation and we're about to penalize them, the maximum is a misdemeanor, class 3, and $1,000 fine. That's the maximum per occurrence, per violation, right?
Yes.
To me, that doesn't feel like enough in like some egregious
Mhm.
situation. So that's point number one. And maybe that is like the standard across the board, but I think of somebody that like digs a huge trench and causes flooding down the hill, and we've told them like, don't do it, and you're out of compliance, and then a flood happens and bad things happen. That's one. The other one on violations, I was a little bit confused on item B. So it says city administrator and/or engineer may suspend any active soil disturbing activity not to exceed 90 days. A use case would be there's some violation through our inspection that we're getting notice of, and then you're saying there's a stop work order, like bulldozers are coming to a stop. You can't do it stop them for more than 90 days, but until they have some sort of remediation. Is that what that is kind of saying?
That's exactly what that is saying.
Okay.
So if for some reason we go out there, they've been warned, they've been fined, and they still are not compliant, we have the right to stop work.
Thank you. The next part where it transitions to mayor or designee, it's maybe like the 7th sentence
Mhm.
now. Is the mayor and or designee, is that accurate based on like the mayor's role in public safety, or is this a typo and supposed to be administrator?
No, I mean, the sample legislation that we were using actually did have the mayor with this authority.
Okay.
But again, the mayor could designate somebody else who has this authority, given that the administrator is the one who provides the written verbal notice, or that the first step. There's a way for the community, I guess, to engage more immediately if the mayor, says, You're,
mean,
you're going to be getting a letter that spells out the violations, but you
Right.
must cease immediately.
Yes.
And yeah,
Okay. It's quite the authority, by the way.
It is.
So I'm just looking like, I mean, if I see somebody digging a huge pond in the middle of Kroger's like parking lot or something, I can tell them to stop. And then we're
Yeah.
gonna follow up with a written warning.
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
You know, this is causing stormwater risk. Okay, cool.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, so following up on his trail of litigation or whatever, so on the appeals process, it says the person aggrieved by any order, requirement, determination. So if the mayor were to take that action, say stop, that is an order that they could appeal, even though it's clearly identified in the language that it's not permitted. So, and then so what prevents a developer from just appealing every decision that we say to them, and we're just held up in court for the next 5 years paying legal fees? Because they don't, I mean, I can see that getting ugly and say, fine, you want to stop my bulldozers? Fine, then I'm gonna appeal this, and now we're gonna have a 2-year battle in the courts, and I mean, I'm sorry.
We are indemnified in here. We're not gonna be sued for any of those losses. Now, they could win the appeal though.
Right. I mean, maybe they say you went through the process incorrectly, you shut me down too early, you didn't give me the written notification.
Right.
I mean, that, they could appeal that kind of
Right.
stuff.
And at that point, it's with legal. So we would be consulting with Bream and talking to him about, what our next steps are and whether or not, they would feel they would be, do anything if for some reason we did overstep. But they would have to stop.
So I'm just wondering, let's see. I mean, is there any way to word it so it says if Sunbury, and I'm not wording this properly, but if Sunbury were to make an error or a mistake, they can appeal. So I'm just fearful that if you get a prickly developer that just does not want to listen to the city and say, hey, we're gonna do it, and they just start throwing up appeals for any order, it's like we could be within our bounds of asking them to not make a mistake. We followed the law, we followed the regulation, and it just seems like it's a lot of authority for the builder or whoever the applicant to appeal based on anything we tell them,
Yeah,
even if it's inside the law itself.
yeah, I'll make a note. Let me talk to Bream a little bit
Okay.
about that. He might have some suggestions. So maybe just to emphasize a couple of points. One is the last time we were here to talk to you, we didn't have the forms in place. So that's really the big difference that you see. The legislation has not changed in any meaningful way since we first came forward. The other thing is, I think we had the early fees in here, but we weren't really sure what the Delaware Soil and Water Conservation District process might look like. So I should add, and I think the mayor was kind of nodding when Carla was saying, this is a relatively common practice. Developers are used to this. This is a practice that exists in Delaware County today. Delaware Soil and Conservation District already is out there doing these site inspections. So it's not a big lift for them. And again, it's not out of the norm of what they traditionally do. And the fact that they would be on site once a week, I think that's kind of the practice or the schedule that they've indicated to us that they would be using. I mean, they'll be looking at multiple sites, multiple lots when they're in a neighborhood or at the subdivision. That again, this is relatively routine. The developers know this. There's precedent for what they do and how they do it. So I think we can, implement this in a relatively seamless way.
So we've never had developers say, I can't believe you guys don't charge us fee.
Probably why they buy it.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
I think this is really important. We do this legislation. I mean, I haven't read through this with a fine tooth comb, but based on what you put together, and I know CT was a big part of this on the front end, so thanks to them. I mean, I think this is great. This just standardizes our process. It gives staff and city officials the ability to have a check and a balance in place. So developers don't just clear a bunch of dirt. It doesn't rain for 3 months. And then when it does rain, we've got a flood. I mean, there's got to be some erosion control mechanisms that have to be in place. I mean, right? We don't have a lot of teeth in our current. Do we have legislation whatsoever? I mean, we're just deferring to the Ohio EPA standards, right? BMPs.
Yeah, we don't have any legislation at the local level at the moment.
But because we live in the state of Ohio, everybody still has to follow the regulations. So
Yeah.
yes, it's good that we are formalizing this. The other thing to keep in mind is that at any point in time, the EPA could audit anybody.
Right.
And they do a typical audit. They call it every permit cycle, which is 5 to 7 years. It's not a precise science. We were talking about when we could be audited. It could be the next 2 to 3 years. And one of the things they could ask us for is documentation on how we are having construction sites inspected. And then whenever we do get audited, if we have an active construction site, it's usually a field visit too. They want to look and see what our process is and try and make it better.
I am so sorry. I have one last question, then I think I'm done. Again, going back to the appeals process, it says, any person, should we say any applicant? Or, I mean, can it be anyone that is aggrieved by an order of some sort? Could it be a homeowner? Could it be the guy running the bulldozer, or does it have to be the applicant?
Entity.
Yeah, like I said, I'll
Okay.
think Dave can ask specifically to get his feedback.
Great work.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got a question too. Sure. The sediment controls or pollutant controls and sediment control practices, runoff control practices. I'm sure this is for commercial as well.
Yes.
So if someone needs to pave a portion of their property and this property has a slope to it, not only would it be digging a hole in their property at some locations, but at another location, if they have a slope and they're there to pave it over to make parking, that, in my opinion, would be a disturbance. And they would have to be sure that their runoff control practices would be monitored as well.
So if they end up disturbing more than an acre, they would be subject to what we consider the large construction requirements, retention, detention, water quality. If it's smaller than an acre, which it sounds like if it's like a neighboring property, it most likely would be, they would be subject to the requirements. Ohio law states that their impacts to their development cannot negatively affect their neighboring property, and they have to be able to demonstrate that. And that's typically just keeping the grades the same or grading it in such a way that that runoff is being directed to the public storm system.
That's what I would think. So would they also have to get a permit?
So for the individual, yes, they would have to get the lot permit.
Any other questions? Right.
Thank you very
Very
much.
much, yes.
Appreciate it.
And now we'll move on to the engineering and planning handout.
So I don't have anything for the screen on this, but I did pass out a document, and this was a topic that we've had at council, and I believe it was brought up during services as well. Just reformatting the engineer's report update in a way that, I guess for the most part, I like to collect and see data, but also hopefully puts it in a way that you can see updates in real time. The request was that this Excel spreadsheet be placed on the city's OneDrive so that everybody would have access. I have placed it on the OneDrive in the council folder. It is the only Excel document in there. So if you have trouble finding it or you'd like a direct link, please let me know. I'm happy to send it your way. But going through this, you'll notice two things. The first page that has the full spreadsheet on it, it is two-sided. So when you turn it over, you will see planning project names. And it just so happened that when I printed this, all the engineering projects were on the first page and all the planning projects were on the second. It probably won't always be this nice when I print it out, but I did want to direct it to you that there are two different headings. So at the beginning, at the top of the spreadsheet, you'll see the engineering project name and then a breakdown with different categories. Open to suggestions if there's more or less information you'd like to see in here. In the past, a previous spreadsheet had a longer summary, but it was requested or pointed out by the mayor in a brief update that I provided I guess a month and a half ago at this point, that if we had links available to the application for you guys, this might help you find the information you're looking for. So if you need a reminder on what's come to services in the past, we can put a link there. Or if we have the plans, we're trying to link that as well. I will give props to Alex and Alyssa. They both worked on the planning project portion of this, filling in the data, and took the time to pull in all the planning and zoning documents per development. So when you click on the links under planning, it will take you to every document under planning and zoning. If that's too much information and you'd rather it be something very specific or a separate link, let me know. We're happy to make adjustments to this, but I really appreciate them going through and filling in the blanks. It is a little difficult for me as a newer employee to always find some of these projects that have been going on for years. On the planning project side, I did want to point out there's one column you'll see that is completely empty. We are planning on populating that. I put development size in there, and one of the requests that our planning department has had is to look at density. So I'm planning on putting something in here that has size of the development and number of lots. That information is being collected now by our intern Maria, who was at council, or I guess at planning and zoning a while ago. So if you haven't met her, she is going to collect that information and populate it for us.
This looks great. I know I was one of the people that was asking for the comprehensive layout. So it's not too much information. I don't think it'll ever be too much information. Just having a place that I can go. I don't think it needed to be presented every single time we met, but having the ability to go find it if I wanted it is fantastic. My question,
Yes.
what's up with the priority column?
Oh, yes.
I get what red and yellow and green mean, but who sets them? What do they mean? What kind of action does it drive?
I can't believe I left out the color. As you guys know from the previous presentation, I am really into color coding things. So, and there was a debate with Alex and Alyssa on what the color scheme should be, if you can imagine. But what we landed on was that red was going to be projects that were going to be happening right now and a top priority. So you'll see I've got the stormwater legislation on here as red, as well as the wastewater treatment plant expansion. That's a topic that keeps coming up, as well as the RRFBs, so those flashing beacons at General Rosecrans Elementary School. So that is the colors. The orange part of it, if it isn't something that is as active, we picked orange for still under construction, but perhaps winding down. And we thought that would be like a construction orange. At least that was the intent. And then yellow is just more of a pause. It still is a topic that continues to come up, but there may not be as many updates, or we're pending information or final design in these cases. So I know Daryl had provided the update on J.R. Smith Park, so we're working on the finances there. And then if you look at Columbus parking lot, we're waiting on final design. So it's kind of.
So it's more like a at a glance status update than it is the degree of severity that is getting treated at.
Like activity, right?
Yeah,
Red.
yeah.
Okay.
Dry out for red, that something's happening.
Yes, or you're going to see it. I can do more colors if you look at it.
I just want to know exactly what they mean, because in my world, red means
Bad.
trouble, burning platform, fix it now.
Yeah, same.
So, yeah, that was because I saw a lot of red.
Yes,
But
and
that
green
makes
meant
sense
go
what
to
you said.
Alyssa, and she was like, we need more green in here. And I'm like, because green does not mean go. The green on the back, there's a green, and that one is complete, the Huntington Bank. So the green items we might leave on for a little bit, and then eventually I will drop them off.
Okay.
The 4-color key just at the bottom or up of the page would be
Sure.
helpful, just to, and then and this is awesome. I love this. This is like, you really get a quick snapshot on this, so thank you. When it talks about next critical item or date,
Yes.
I know a lot, it's very hard on a lot of projects to nail down a date. Is there any way to do like like a ballpark, like Q1, it's expected Q1 or Q2, because when it doesn't have a date, I just don't know if that, is that gonna be done in the next 6 months, a year? So maybe, even that can change, but just a ballpark would be awesome.
Yeah, I can try and pinpoint it a little bit more than the way I have it. I see what you're saying. Yep.
Thank you.
And then I put on the department's calendar, Fridays will be our update. So we're going to have a calendar reminder to make sure we're getting in here and not forgetting to keep things as up to date as possible. It doesn't mean we won't go in at other times if we're in the middle of uploading documents, but we're going to try and keep this as up to date as possible.
Well, I think
Be public information as well.
Right now it's on the OneDrive, but anything we do is public, so it could be sent out. I just don't think the links would work for them because not everybody has access to our OneDrive. But certainly it's something that could be shared.
I feel like that would, not to say we shouldn't share it.
Yeah.
But this is too concise for somebody to digest. What is our process if the general public wants to inquire in depth about one of the projects we're running?
Yeah, I was going to say, I certainly this document is a public document. Feel free to share it. But if somebody wants more detailed documents, please have them reach out to us. I think we would want sort of an understanding of what it is they're looking for. I mean, that's generally the public records process. You have to define in some way what you're seeking. So
Great. I can imagine somebody getting a hold of it. Look at all this red. They're behind on everything.
All right, if I need to rethink the color scheme, so she was right.
All right. Any other questions on the tracking document?
If you're working in it, please provide any feedback. Especially the links if you're looking for something else and we can keep it moving forward.
Now, the links will generally have a picture and maps for most of the projects, right? When it's a development of some kind.
So on the engine.
Work, yeah.
Yeah, on the engineering side, it is mostly the plans, the maps, or a presentation that I found that was given here for more information. Ultimately, if there are any ordinances, resolutions associated, I would like to start populating that as well. So whether or not these all become folders, so you'll have multiple things to open up, or if that's too overwhelming for you guys, we can make it so that it's always just one key document, if that's kind of what you land on and what you're looking for. Right now, and when you open the planning ones, you're gonna find a lot of information.
I say, you may want to restrict like anybody except for your team's access to like edit only. So we don't go in there and like delete your file.
I had already had that thought that you should not be trusted. An accidental thing, but right now I believe only Alex, Alyssa, and me can have edit capabilities. But if you'd like to try it, because I didn't have anybody go in there, I guess I could ask Daryl to jump in there and try and mess with the form. Yes, so we already are trying to lock that down.
Thanks.
All right. All right, so we'll move on to other updates. We got the State Route 37 project.
So Carla, just be conscious of the time here. We don't have as much time, I think, to dig as deeply into this. So maybe just again,
State Route
jump to
37 in a
the
nutshell.
I hear what you're saying. Yes. So for the State Route 37 widening project, the main point is that at council tonight, we will be bringing forward a first reading for the design contract. We followed a quality-based selection process and have selected American Structure Point for this somewhere in the range $7.5 million construction project, give or take. I wanted to share just an overview so you're aware of where the project is located. This is showing you that the widening portion of the project is going to occur from South Morning Street down to Letts Avenue, primarily focusing on the widening at the bridge abutments. And then you can also see That green circle indicates where the pedestrian bridge will be located, which is the same location where the bridge abutments are located for a connection for the Ohio to Erie Trail. I won't read through all of these, but essentially in the initial application, this project was awarded federal funds, 4.2 million, which is fantastic. These are some of the goals and anticipated design parts to this project. So widening the lanes, a 10-foot wide shared use path, sidewalk on the other side, fixing storm sewer drainage, adding curb and gutter, retaining walls. And then I took some pictures because if you remember, I like to walk people through. I didn't do as much circling, but just so you can see it, this is looking south at Morning Street. So the beginning of the project, you can see how the road narrows. I'm sure you all are very familiar with it. I also wanted to try and point out some of the challenges along the way. Obviously, it's already a steep slope, and if it's going to be wider, we may be adding retaining walls in locations that previously did not have retaining walls. As you get into the bridge abutment locations, you know what, it's harder to see here than I realized, but on the right side or the west side of the street, there are utility poles there that will need to be relocated. So that'll be one of the critical path items. Retaining walls, we already talked about. There will be curb and gutter, so some additional storm sewer work. Sanitary is in the vicinity, so all of that, one of the first steps for this design contract is going to be the preliminary engineering work, and that entails this very general timeline that I quickly pulled in today. You can see on the left-hand side, task 1, the design contract will be for this $240,000 amount for just a first portion of the design work. And the reason they're doing that is so that they can hit the ground running with survey, environmental feasibility study, and public involvement. That is a requirement for the federal money as well as just a best practice. We want to reach out to the residents and get feedback. So they're going to have alternatives. At that point, after we've had public involvement, they'll go through and start doing detailed design. And you can see all these different stages. These staged submissions are a requirement by ODOT for the funding portion. Overall, the anticipated fee will be in the $750,000 range, just based on what a typical percentage of a construction project would be, 10%. And then we'll come back to council and to services with this second task item, and hopefully it will be a little bit under that amount. This is my last slide.
Right, so Carla thinks it's pretty tight at this point. This is a construction project that in 2027, is that and that's the time frame in which it gets started?
2027, their fiscal year. So 2026 into 2027.
Yeah, so getting started with the design consultant is critical to staying on that schedule. I think, again, the other key point here is that this is only part of what the total design cost would be for this project, but it really, I think, is an important first step to identify what these alternatives look like and to engage the community in a discussion about that. And then before we come back to you, obviously, we'll have a sense of what those alternatives are and what the residents' reaction is to those as well. So there'll be, ongoing engagement with the services committee, council, and residents as well. So again, first reading only tonight on the selection of the design consultant, but we can certainly bring this back for more discussion at the next meeting because I know we're running a little tight on time.
You'll need your SWP3 permit.
There you go. There you go.
We have 10 minutes left, enough time for the utility rate.
Well, we probably won't even take 10 minutes for that, but go for it.
All right, so yeah, just to give you all a quick update, we met with Baker Tilly this week just to make sure during our kickoff meeting that they have all of the data that they're going to need to complete the utility rate survey. Some of the items that have already been sent over to them have been a record of our debt, detailed expense reports. They did request during that meeting that they would like a 5-year CIP, just breakdown, and I checked with Dana today and that's already been sent over. So at this point, they are going with this. They have all the data that they need and they will reach out if they have anything else. With that being said, Baker Tilly has said that they're going to present their initial report to us at the end of this month. And the goal being, once we get their initial report, we're able to go through the data. They will be in front of the services committee on, I believe, early December. And there will be a representative from Baker Tilly here to help walk through our report, all their data that they collected, and then to answer any questions that you all might have as well. But other than that, I know that was a very quick overview, but we are well on our way to getting this completed and being able to present it to you all come December.
The other thing I would add is that our existing ordinance basically doesn't expire, but the rate increases run through the end of this calendar year. That's what's in the existing city ordinance. That's a reason to be doing the rate study. And certainly with all the infrastructure for the capital projects anticipated as well, we want to make sure that we understand where that rate needs to be. And we also want to make sure it remains competitive in the marketplace. And that is one other component that they're going to be doing. They'll show us kind of what other communities are paying, with respect to sanitary sewer fees as well. So you can see it in context, not just as a kind of a standalone number, if you will. So,
And they are going to be looking at utility rates as well as tap fees. We've requested they look into that as well.
yeah. So again, we'll have that on the agenda for a more detailed discussion at the next services committee meeting. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything remaining for good of the group?
I do have one request, and I was thinking about either asking Alex or this group. Do not need an answer tonight. I've gotten questions about what inspections occur on new home builds. So I know there's been some odd things that have happened in Price Ponds, like people's sewer lines collapsing in their front yard. I mean, they're brand new homes, and you're just thinking, like, where along the inspection process did that break down, literally? And there have been other questions about like HVAC units and things in general. I'm not trying to say it's all Pulte's fault. Kind of I am, but I'm also trying to understand a little bit better. Are there gaps in our inspection process? Because I've been asked point blank, like, what do your inspectors do? And I can't clearly answer that. So at some point, if we can just get an overview, either in the services committee or in planning and zoning, on what all those inspections are capturing and at what touch points. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's it. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
So move.
Second by Mr. Ayer. Roll call.
Mr. Capel,
Yes.
Mr. Aaron,
Yes.
Mayor St. John,
Yes.
Mr. Grumney,
Yes.
4 days, we are adjourned.
Thank you.